Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and asks, will he recommend the adoption of the Board of Inquiry's proposed National Policy Statement on freshwater management now that the Land and Water Forum has reported back? If so, when?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the Land and Water Forum, involving 58 diverse organisations with an interest in water, has recommended the adoption of a national policy statement on freshwater, but it also recommended that we amend the one that was recommended by the Board of Inquiry. I have been further advised by officials and stakeholders that the version by the Board of Inquiry is ultra-virus, i.e. it goes beyond what a national policy statement can do under the Resource Management Act. That is why Agriculture Minister David Carter and I have asked officials from MAF and MFE to work on a revised NPS, taking on board the recommendations of the Land and Water Forum. If any significant changes are made from the Board of Inquiry report, the law requires that there be a process of consultation publicly.
Dr Russel Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr Speaker. In light of his answer that he does accept the recommendation of the Land and Water Forum that we need a national policy statement, does he also accept its recommendation that we need it quickly, and what does he understand by the word quickly?
The Honourable Dr Nick
Speaker,
Smith.
I firstly want to make plain the government has made no decisions on the Land and Water Forum report. We hugely welcome it. The fact that we've got organisations like Federated Farmers, Forest and Bird, coming to a consensus around the way forward on freshwater management, the government thinks is a huge step forward. We've only received the final report today. We want to get advice from officials, but it is the government's view that we have been treading water, excuse the phrase, for a long time on freshwater policy, and we need to make progress.
Dr Russel Norman.
Does he agree with Environmental Defence Society Chairman Gary Taylor that it is crucially important that we have the national policy statement as soon as possible, and that other issues can be dealt with separately? And if so, when will we have the national policy statement?
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I certainly agree that we've got over 53 recommendations to consider from the Land and Water Forum report. I don't think the government's response will be a single measure. It will be a package that will take some time, likely a number of years. I certainly accept that there is a need to get on and resolve the issues around the national policy statement, but the government has not yet decided that program, particularly given the advice from officials that the Board of Inquiry version will need to be amended for it to be consistent with the RMA, and the law itself requires a process of public consultation on any changes.
Brendan Burns.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've asked this question three separate ways now, seeking some kind of time frame. I appreciate the Minister can't give an exact time frame, but if you could ask the Minister to give some kind of time frame for when we will have the NPS, because currently we haven't got anything out of him about a time frame.
I hear the honourable member, but if he reflects on the last supplementary question he asked, if he asked specifically what is the time frame, it might have been possible for me to insist on a more precise answer, but the member actually asked, does the Minister agree with some statement by someone called Gary Taylor, if I remember the question correctly? Now, the Minister answered that perfectly, said he did agree with some aspects of what that person said. So the remedy's in the member's own hands. If he wants a precise answer, he's got to ask a precise question. Dr Russel Norman.
To the point of order, Mr Speaker. If you read the primary, you'll see the primary does say when. So I was giving the Minister the benefit of the doubt because he's obviously there's an extended time frame, but I was trying to get a more specific time frame, and the primary did say when.
Well, the member has further supplementary questions. He can chase that matter very precisely with the Minister, given he's not satisfied with the answers so far. Brendan Burns, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, given the Land and Water Forum's laudable report suggests it will take considerable time to develop the environmental and economic tools necessary to maintain the quality of water emerging from new storage schemes, will he now advise the Prime Minister to abandon his goals of seeing new water allocations in place in Canterbury next year?
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, firstly, what I think is hugely encouraging in the Land and Water Forum report is that you have got key environmental organisations like Fish and Game, Forest and Bird, Ecologic, the Environment Defence Society, saying and recognising the economic opportunities that go with storage, and equally so, we've got organisations like Federated Farmers recognising the need to lift the game around water quality standards, and I think that's a huge step forward. I don't recall the Prime Minister saying any storage facility would be built next year. I know he's a tremendous Prime Minister, but I don't think he'd do it quite that quickly. But members opposite should not doubt this government's view that freshwater is an incredibly important resource. There are economic opportunities that go with it, that we want to advance those economic opportunities, but ensure that they are met with fundamental environmental bottom lines.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, when will he recommend the adoption of the Board of Inquiry's proposed national policy statement on freshwater management?
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, we've only received the Land and Water Forum report today. The Cabinet has not had the opportunity to consider any of the recommendations. Myself and my colleague David Carter have asked for officials' advice on the amendments that would come from the sort of recommendations from the Land and Water Forum report. I would hope we would have those by year's end. We've also given commitments quite strongly to the Maori Party and to the iwi leadership group that we would consult with them on such decisions. I think this is an issue that we should make progress on next year.
Brendan Burns.
To the Minister, can he give a commitment to this House that major new schemes to store and allocate water, which come into effect before the recommendations of the Land and Water Forum are enacted, will be subject to the sorts of environmental rules that the Forum's 58 stakeholders signed up to?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, it's certainly the Government's view that if we are going to have expanded irrigation in New Zealand, and there are large economic opportunities that come from it, we need to make sure that that is matched in parallel by good environmental standards that will ensure that water quality is not compromised by taking advantage of those economic opportunities. There's a huge amount of work to do in response to this report. That work begins today.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not the case that adopting the proposed national policy statement would be the swiftest way to immediately set rules for clean water so we can get on with cleaning up our degraded waterways? And if so, does he believe that simply making progress on it next year is really fast enough?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I draw the members' attention to exactly what the Land and Water Forum, representing 58 organisations, groups like Forest and Bird, groups like Fish and Game, groups like Ecologic, and what they said was this: the current draft is a basis to work from. They are not recommending that the government immediately adopt the Land and Water Forum report. I hear the interjection from the Labor member, what's the government doing? What I'd like to know is what the previous government did in 9 years about freshwater management.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr.
Order.
Speaker.
I've called Dr. Russell Norman.
To the Minister, will he give this House a guarantee that the proposed national policy statement will not be weakened when he finally recommends it?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, what the government is going to do is consider, alongside the Board of Inquiry report on the NPS, the advice that we've received from the Land and Water Forum, and as I've already indicated to the member, myself and David Carter have indicated to both MAF and MFE that we want advice from those officials so that we can get a robust national policy statement in place.
Very good. Brent, point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Mr. Speaker, it was a very simple question. It's will it be strengthened or weakened? Can he guarantee that it won't be weakened? He didn't address that part of the question. Well, that was the only question, actually.
I think the member's got to be realistic in he can't expect the Minister to give exactly the answer he might want to hear, because there may be no yes or no. What does weakened mean? The Minister explained to the House what would happen and what has to be considered in dealing with the report. Now, the member asking the question may consider some of those matters may strengthen or weaken it. But those are matters of opinion, and I can't insist on a Minister giving a precise answer to that kind of question, because there's no precise answer to that kind of question. Brendan Burns.
Supplementary.
No, point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, point of order.
Thank you.
Apologies.
I seek your guidance, Mr. Speaker. The Minister said he could not recall the Prime Minister talking about new storage being built